The conflict between the traditional characteristics of visual art and the sharp, angular, often approximate geometry-aesthetic is something almost as old as the game itself, and while each update provides new tools to bridge the gap and ease that dissonance, it's hard not to feel like something was lost in the process. Building levels with only rigid, often unwieldy shapes to construct designs and patterns is not some intrinsically virtuous action, but it does often force the artist to lean into more expressionist, abstract, or even surreal forms for their work. The 1.9 update is of course often held as a perfect balance between accessibility and limitation, where levels realized this style to the fullest, but it's important to remember that it wasn't just the limitations of the game that made that era what it was. The specific context and time period in which those legendary works were built is important. Even modern GDPS levels are not 1.9 levels. It is no longer 2015. The community is not in the same frame of mind, and developments in style and techniques that were unknown at the time can't be unlearned. This is part of why those levels often feel kind of hollow to me. Are you trying to get into the headspace that produced La Campanella, or are you just using a specific set of blocks just for kicks? Carpet of Flowers is clearly not a 1.9 level, given, among other things, its object count and its use of modern layout tricks, but for my dollar it wields both the spirit and style of that era, and the increased fidelity of modern GD better than almost anything that has come out in the years since then, while remaining unambiguously beautiful in its own right. This is partially due to the incorporation of a theme that not only benefits from, but necessitates, organized yet unreal sequences, and a struggle between intense clarity and ambiguity, stuff that looks good under a microscope and blowing by in the periphery. It's downright operatic, not only in the elegance of its presentation, but the theatrical, uber-compelling tone and weight that it carries in its theme and setting. The layout as a whole has this airy weightlessness to it that adds to the tension, almost like an unreliable narrator. Level progression and motions are arranged in a very clean yet natural manner, corresponding to the Foreboding Storms approach, and, of course, the elements of the soundtrack courtesy of the brilliant Lauren Baufield. I really love how the player's mental picture of the titular carpet changes as the level goes on, divinely alluring in the beginning, then vaguely off-putting, staunch, megalophobia-inducing, even later grotesque, horrifying. Every sequence is undeniably linked, but they feel so neatly ordered, almost to the degree of Death Moon's rooms and spaces. And then a moment's respite. This lily pad section is just unforgettable, the calm before the storm, the very last opportunity to turn back. At this slow pace, you can really take in the vast uniformity. But it's not really all that tranquil. A key characteristic of most levels is that there is no doing things at your own pace like in other games, and as these precious seconds go by, there's an acute understanding that they will very likely be your last few on Earth, both in the level canon and the game-playing experience. The climax itself is just as harrowing as you'd hope. It genuinely comes across as the wrath of God, or nature, or whatever you believe in. I have seen the opinion that it is a bit too short and ends too abruptly, which I can understand, but I think it's better off as a result. I find it very poignant that after all this build-up, you dance around and maneuver for a grand total of maybe 10 seconds before being completely consumed. This little ending sequence is one of my 3 or so favorites in the game. This little second or so where the visuals and most instrumentals are cut makes for a perfect moment, either of peace and acceptance or angst and fear, depending on who you are. Yeah, the challenge is over and most players will be celebrating, but this title card probably doubles as a cause of death report. The tone and setting are well enough already, but it's these little nuances that really make Carpet of Flowers a home run for me. It feels like floral catastrophe with about 10 times the subtlety. There are scenes that are immediately captivating, even haunting, but little details like the way these spike petals resemble teeth, the square flowers being the same color as the portals being used for their particle effects, and the drops click pattern resembling a heartbeat that then flatlines. These are some of the most vivid details within my memory of Carpet of Flowers. I do wish it were a tad easier, but that's a me thing. It doesn't change the fact that it's easily one of the most riveting experiences the game has to offer. Gorgeous enough that it could stand as an individual visual spectacle, ferocious enough that it could work even in literary form. It just works on every level. Right now it's just a hair outside of my reasonable completion range, but I will be beating this in the future, so this rating might be subject to change. Not much though, because Carpet of Flowers is so fundamentally sound. If Exile is a genuine newcomer to the creating scene, then they are on a FunnyGame level GOAT trajectory, and if not, Carpet of Flowers is probably still the best level they've ever released. 9 out of 10.